We have a lot to cover in today's video, including the latest reports that makes it sound like the New York Rangers are putting together the framework for a Patrick Kane trade. At this point, many will be surprised if they don't pull it off. We also have the latest updates on the Vancouver Canucks and Brock Besser and Luke Schenn. The latest on Gavrikov with Columbus. More trades from Washington is certainly possible. Where might JVR end up? A couple defenseman options for the Maple Leafs and the Senators as well. Plus, we have a big name on waivers, Kapanen. Other injury updates and some news with NHL player safety. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a ton of news to get into today, so let's dive right in and get started. First up, big news from the NHL waiver wire. First up, yesterday, we had goaltender Chris Driedger of the Seattle Kraken. As I mentioned, I thought he might clear given the fact he's coming off a long-term injury, but otherwise was an intriguing option for teams to take a chance on, but he did in fact clear. So he will not be going to a new team. He'll be reassigned to Seattle's American Hockey League affiliate. We have two new players on waivers today, including Kevin Gravel of the Nashville Predators and Kasperi Kapanen of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Kapanen is an intriguing name and certainly not one that we necessarily saw coming, although we knew the Penguins, the way they've been playing as of late, appeared to be imploding from within. And changes were probably coming in some capacity. Kapanen's a player that's been very inconsistent. To be honest, after the year he had last year, I was surprised that they re-signed him to a 2-year extension. I thought maybe 1 year might be more likely, giving him a chance to kind of reprove himself. But 2 years is a little more challenging to get out of. So, of course, he still has another year to go. So I don't know if anybody's going to claim Kasperi Kapanen. There's been a lot of rumors and whispers that the Penguins have been trying to trade him and find a fresh start for him, and they obviously haven't been able to do that. So I don't know if anybody's going to claim him for free on waivers, but once he clears, maybe a team will give him a shot because at least they don't have to worry. They can put him in the American Hockey League as well. Might make things more flexible. I don't know. There's a lot of rumblings within Pittsburgh that there's a bit of a conflict of ideas, you could say, between GM Ron Hextall and head coach Mike Sullivan. There was an athletic report today from writer Rob Rossi indicating that Mike Sullivan is very much intrigued and feels the team should be pushing to acquire Jacob Chychrun from Arizona, but Hextall does not want to do that because he does not want to pay the price tag and does not want to give up a lot of future draft capital. As you can imagine, Sullivan is always wants to win now, more concerned about today. Hextall is trying to balance today in the future. Obviously, they re-signed Malkin, they re-signed Letang, they still got Crosby for a few more years. They get this old, the old running mates back together, so to speak, for another few years of opportunities to make a run for another Stanley Cup. And right now, it looks like that window is slammed shut. Based on how they've played lately, they've had inconsistent goaltending, injury problems with Tristan Jarry. The blue line hasn't been good enough. There's really a lot of holes to fill in Pittsburgh, and that's the other option. I think why, based on reports that Hextall's not crazy about going after Chychrun because of the high price tag. It's going to, bring in one player if he pays that price, whereas, he might pay that price to a variety of teams and bring in 2 or 3 players to fill different holes because they certainly have multiple issues going on with that team. So Kapanen on waivers is creating a big debate on what's going on in Pittsburgh. They're slipping into the playoffs slowly, and you got to wonder if teams that are chasing them down, like obviously the Islanders are right there. You got Detroit and Buffalo. Ottawa was pushing, but I guess they have a tough schedule. They might slip a bit, but it's possible that the Capitals and Penguins could both miss the playoffs, which would be the first time in a long time. And Mike Sullivan, as a head coach of the Penguins, has not missed the playoffs. So we'll see how this goes. But Kapanen on waivers, we'll find out 2:00 Eastern tomorrow if anybody claims him. I have my doubts, just given his contract. Otherwise, if it was just 1 year, I would think teams might give him a chance. Injury updates, a couple of ones from around the league. The Panthers have reactivated Anthony Duclair, so the Duke is finally ready to return. They've been able to tweak their roster enough to get him onto the active roster. So he makes a long awaited return after an Achilles tendon injury that he suffered in the offseason. We knew Cole Perfetti of the Winnipeg Jets, having a solid rookie campaign, was injured. Now we know a little bit further. It sounds like his season is pretty much over, at least the regular season. He's going to be out for about 8 weeks. So not that he makes a lot of money being on a rookie contract, but that's something that can go in LTIR, which will give the Jets a little bit more flexibility cap-wise. But unfortunate for him that his rookie campaign and push for a Calder Trophy will come to an end, although I think he kind of slowly faded out of the conversation, but still was, certainly in the mix for sure. But, it's just an unfortunate injury that's slowed him down. Tonight, the Ottawa Senators are welcoming back Cam Talbot and Jake Sanderson as they do battle the Carolina Hurricanes. They also recalled defenseman Jacob Larson, but he's just there as an extra where they're on the road. They've also have a few updates today from NHL player safety. Brad Marchand was fined $5,000 for a dangerous trip against Oliver Bjorkstrand of the Kraken last night. It was a pretty good game between Boston and Seattle, with the Bruins ultimately coming out victorious there. The other news with player safety is Tampa Bay defenseman Erik Cernak had a hearing today for an elbow on Sabres captain Kyle Okposo, and he was suspended for 2 games for a hit to the head with an elbow on Okposo. So not good news there on that front. We also got word that it's called Warner Brothers Discovery, which is operates some regional telecasts for hockey programs in the United States. So we're talking about like AT&T Sportsnet, for example, is one of the main ones they operate. In the NHL, they have regional broadcast rights with Seattle, Vegas, and Pittsburgh. And they, like we talked about before, like the ones that operate Bally Sports, they're also struggling, might be going through a bankruptcy, and they've given those teams notice that they have until March 31st, I think it was, to take back their rights and to figure out the things from there. Or they're going to likely be filing for bankruptcy shortly after that. They're trying to see if those teams will kind of take over the regional broadcast and use a lot of their same employees when it comes to cameramen and, the reporters and all that kind of stuff that are all involved in running those. I don't know. It's messy. The regional sports programming packages in the United States are certainly in a big mess, and this is going to cause big issues. We talked about the other one that operates Bally Sports, and if the rights are not paid to these teams, like that's hockey revenue that could have an impact on the cap. And now we have another scenario that could be playing a role in that. It's also not bad. Certainly, bad news is what I meant to say, and hopefully we don't get more of these. But geez, it's not good at all. We're going to probably see a shift in how things are done on a regional basis for sure. Also, a news story that will make Ottawa Senators fans happy. There's a news article out of CTV News Ottawa where they talked to former captain Daniel Alfredson, and the story ultimately says that Daniel Alfredson would love to have a front office role with the Ottawa Senators once the team sale is complete and a new ownership group is in place, ultimately calling it a dream job. So that's certainly good news. I mean, I think many people suspect that Alfredson will be more involved once the team sale is officially complete. We know that he butted heads with former owner Eugene Melnyk, which is one that kind of kept him away there for a while. He did have a role to send briefly in a front office. It was pretty much just as a consultant. He was really just there for a year trying to figure things out and see what he would want to do longer term, and decided he was just taking a break and just wasn't happy because I just think he wasn't happy with ownership. It just really boiled down to that. We know that he, along with a few other former top players, certainly butted heads with Eugene quite a bit. Now that the sale is going to be complete, of course, Eugene passed away. His daughters are running things now and have the team for sale. We should have some bids coming through here within the next week or so. I think sometime early March is when the bids are going to be due for the first round, as the NHL goes through this with the team and their bankers to see who will be the next owners of the franchise. But great news that Alfredson's making it more publicly known that he wants to be involved and would love to get back into a front office capacity, maybe a team president role. I'm not sure what would be best for him longer term, but we will see. I know he also mentioned before, as he was coaching his kids, he found that he really loved coaching as well. So maybe someday he'll have that kind of role. Hard to say, but it's nice to see him involved and back more involved with the team lately as well. Onto the trade section of the video. Lots of updates here today. Of course, we know that the Columbus Blue Jackets have been sitting out Gavrikov. Of course, as we know, there was reportedly a deal in place with Boston, which obviously was not really so much as secure as they thought it was. Based on the reports from Elliot Friedman and a few other reporters today, indicated that basically there was a little bit of a miscommunication between the teams, that the Bruins didn't really feel it was as firm as the Jackets thought. Clearly, Boston has gone out and made a deal with Washington to pick up Orlov and Garden Hathaway. So they no longer are going to be trading for Gavrikov. So we'll see where this goes. But it was also confirmed that the Jackets I think basically the kind of summarize why it never happened was you seen Craig Smith go to Washington in that trade. I'm assuming that they just didn't want to take that on, perhaps. But it is reported that they were going to take the assets, including the first-round pick and other draft picks from the Bruins in that trade, which was believed to be a first and a third, and now we're going to package it with some other things that they have and trying to get Chychrun out of Arizona. So that is believed to be what they were doing. Now, Elliot Friedman wonders if Gavrikov might be a fit, maybe in Edmonton. They've been rumored to wanting to add on the blue line. So we'll see. There could be other teams. There's lots of teams looking for help on defense. So we'll see where things go. The Florida Panthers, of course, as I mentioned, they activated anything declared today, but there's still a very, very tight limited salary cap situation. They're still kind of in the mix there for the final wild card spot. So it's hard to say if they're going to be a playoff team or not. But one name that is being rumored to be in the available is Colin White. Of course, he signed a one-year deal after being bought out by the Ottawa Senators. Is having an okay season in Florida, but certainly somebody they'd be willing to part with if they can get the cap flexibility back. In Washington, of course, we've seen a big trade with Orlov and Hathaway. There could be more sell-offs coming. I don't see there being a total tear-down or full rebuild mode or anything like that. As long as they've got Ovechkin there, I don't see that really being the case. Of course, they have some other longer-term contracts as well. You know, you've got Ovechkin, Kuznetsov, Backstrom, Darcy Kemper, TJ Oshie, John Carlson. Like, they have a pretty good core. It's an older core, mind you, but still, they can do a retool here on the fly. And there's also some talk now that they've got these extra assets from Boston and some a little bit more cap flexibility now that they've traded Orlov and Hathaway. Maybe they'll go after Jacob Chychrun. There could certainly be in the mix. It could be a good fit there. But a few more defensemen could be on the move. Some combination of Trevor Van Riemsdyk, Eric Gustafsson, or possibly Nick Jensen. On any of those defensemen could be moved. I know Elliot Friedman mentioned either Toronto or Ottawa, where they both are looking for D. And these guys are not making a lot of money, under $1 million a year. So there could be some cheaper finds than what they've been looking for. I specifically mentioned Trevor Van Riemsdyk might be a sneaky good option for Ottawa. And even a guy like Nick Jensen could be in a similar situation, or even Toronto might look to that as well. James Van Riemsdyk, the brother of Trevor Van Riemsdyk, both brothers here could be traded at the deadline, as been recently linked to the Colorado Avalanche. Now, of course, the Flyers forward highly expected to be dealt. Of course, the Flyers will retain 50% and knock things down to about a $3.5 million cap hit. So you never know. There could also be a third team to make it even cheaper, but it's going to cost more assets going out the door. Hard to say, but Colorado, the defending Stanley Cup champions, very much expected that making a couple of additions here at the deadline. I think that they're going to likely go after a center as well, because JVR will be helpful for that top nine wingers role to get some extra goals. It'd be good net front presence, good veteran, but I think they could use some help at center too. We'll see what the Avalanche do. They might even look at the blue line, depending on how the health is of their D-core, because they've battled a lot of injuries this year. When it comes to Vancouver, there's an article today in the Province, a local newspaper, indicating that it's not an if, but when. We see some trades for guys like Luke Schenn and Brock Besser. Both deals are being worked on heavily and are expected to be done before the deadline. A number of teams involved with Luke Schenn. It's a good chance he could end up in Canada, but there are some U.S. teams in the mix too. But anywhere from Toronto, Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg, all potential Luke Schenn destinations. Brock Besser still heavily rumored to be linked to the Minnesota Wild. We've seen Billy Guerin do some salary retentions now a couple of times between the Ryan O'Reilly trade and on the Capitals deal with Orlov as well. So they've gotten some extra draft picks. Maybe they'll use those draft picks to maybe swing another trade perhaps. There could be extra assets to get a guy like Besser, but they also need to move money out. Hard to say, but it's believed that they're working on trying to figure things out. That they really, the concept at least of Brock Besser playing with Matt Boldy on the wings, with Eric Cernak likely being their pivot down the middle. So we'll see where that goes. But Besser trade is very likely. JT Miller getting some interest, but at this point, not really expected to be traded, at least not anytime soon. And the Rangers, like I mentioned before, reports from the New York Post, Larry Brooks, Molly Walker, and a few other reporters, all out there saying that the Rangers are putting the framework together to acquire Patrick Kane from Chicago. Many feel like they're going to be quite shocked if it doesn't happen at this point, but it likely will not happen right until the deadline day. The Rangers are likely going to be putting a player on waivers as early as tomorrow. Tomorrow kind of has to, because the way that the teams can move the players around and accrue their cap space, if you don't see the Rangers put either Kravtsov or Leschyshyn on waivers tomorrow, then I would expect a trade is happening tomorrow. Something's got to give. They need to get money off the books tomorrow to let more cap space accrue, but it's quite possible that Kravtsov will be included in the trade. I think Leschyshyn will be put on waivers. That's the more likely scenario. If he clears, they can put him down in the AHL, get him off the books no matter what. But they have been held out of their games and practices for what they're calling roster management, because they don't want either of those guys getting hurt. Zach Jones is the likely defensive prospect that will be involved going to the Blackhawks. To be involved with him in a draft pick is likely what the main compensation will be for the Blackhawks. But of course, at the same time, you also have to wonder that there's going to be a third team, because reports are from Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick and a few other reporters too that have also commented on this, that they've been hearing that Chris Drury's putting some notes out there, trying to contact a lot of his executives around the league, that they're looking to free up about $1.6 million in cap space. Well, that number matches up to what guys like Kravtsov and Leschyshyn are both earning. So that tells you that those are the contracts they're looking to move. They may not necessarily be involved in the Kane trade. It's possible that one goes on waivers to create some extra space now so they can accrue more, and then the other could be involved in the trade, but it could be something completely separate as well. Either way, they want to move them off the books. They need the space. And like I said, Jones in a pick could be what's going on to the Blackhawks, but there's also likely going to be a third team involved because they have to get the Patrick Kane salary down. They need to have Chicago retain 50% and have a third team take another 25%. So you're probably looking at giving another 4th or 5th round pick to that team. There's a lot of speculation that could end up being the Montreal Canadiens. Apparently, Kent Hughes was trying to get in on the Ryan O'Reilly trade with the Leafs to help them and get an extra pick for his efforts, because really it's not that big a deal for them to do this. They don't need a lot of space to make it happen. So at the end of the day, and it's not a lot of real money either. So we'll see what happens, but it could be a case of Chicago, Montreal, and the Rangers, or if it's not Montreal, it'll be another third team doing a trade where Chicago trades Kane to the Rangers. The Rangers then send probably like a 4th round pick, 5th round pick, something to that nature to the third party team like Montreal to retain the other salary. Maybe it's a prospect instead of a pick. That's also possible. And then Chicago likely gets some combination of Kravtsov, Jones, and a 1st or 2nd round pick or something to that nature. And we'll go from there. Like, it may not even be as much of a return going to Chicago, because at the end of the day, Kane has all the leverage here. So if he's, forcing his way into New York, they're not going to give up a whole lot, right? So we will see where everything goes, but it's probably going to be a little bit, or feel underwhelming, kind of like the Claude Giroux trade did with the Panthers. But if they can get a fairly high draft pick in Zach Jones, that's possible. Now, Vitaly Kravtsov could also be what goes to Montreal. It could be a little bit more complicated. We know Jeff Gorton, obviously quite familiar with Kravtsov because he's the one that was running the Rangers when they drafted him. So maybe he wants to bring him to Montreal for a fresh start. So we'll see. There's going to be some moving parts. So I suspect tomorrow Leschyshyn goes on waivers. Kravtsov either gets traded to Kane, or in the Kane trade, or sooner, and then a separate deal. And then you see the Kane trade go through likely on deadline day, like I said, with Jones and a draft pick, and then another draft pick going to the third party. That's what it seems to be lining up right now. We'll have to wait and see if that's what actually plays out. Let me know your thoughts on that more down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.